or how I like to define branding is consumers don't care, but do it anyway. And here's why.
Mm.
You can eat your food or serve food to your child on a table,
Yeah.
but it looks better in a plate and feels better in a plate. Whether that's
Yeah.
conditioning or how we grew up or not, that's really what the branding is. It's like, it's consumers would not notice a lot of things that you've put in, but it does
Yeah.
contribute to why they buy it.
All right, take two. All right, we had some Zoom issues, so here we go again.
Yeah.
So yeah, we met on Twitter in a thread. We had a cool discussion where I excuse me, I can't even remember the exact topic that we were chatting about, but it was a very interesting back and forth, which made me think, hey, maybe this could be a very interesting conversation. So I wanted to have a conversation, which is why we're here right now. So if you don't mind, like giving a paragraph or two of your background.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'm Phillip J. Clayton, and I'm a brand design and development consultant. That would be the proper term. And I'm a design judge, brand and marketing judge. I judge packages with the PAC Global Awards, which is a Canadian packaging consortium. And I'm from Kingston, Jamaica, but I'm a co-founder of an agency that works out of Miami, globally from there. And my background is my professional background is advertising and marketing, and fine art was my foundation, and design became my purpose.
Yeah, nice. Were you longer in advertising than what you're doing right now in brand strategy, or?
Well, for me, so brand became a passion really early because my father used to work in advertising, and he's also a fine artist. And I used to watch him work. There's work in his office at home, and brand has always been in advertising for me. It's one of those. It's an intangible thing, yeah, but at the same time, I need to know what I'm going to be marketing, what I'm going to be selling. So brand represents that for me. So
Yeah.
I've kind of been doing both the entire time, but working in advertising itself with agencies, that started much later on. So for me, brand started while I was in college, working with different projects. I would be invited to work with projects.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. So you mentioned you have a background in fine arts. Do you feel like that has helped you in your career with advertising and branding?
Oh,
Or do you feel
absolutely.
okay?
Yeah, it definitely did. The art for me, like science, has a lot of experimental aspects to it, and discovering after discovering a business solution, trying to communicate communicate a solution, but to wrap that all up, the creative aspect helps to wrap it up for an emotional response, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
People connect with the artistic side, not necessarily the business side.
Yeah.
Business really just try and find ways of distributing and having access so people can actually buy whatever they're selling. That's how I view it. So art definitely helps with the brand side, the design side for as a friend said it, actually, let me just rephrase all of that in one sentence. He said, you can't wrap a turd in Christmas paper.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I'm actually a really big fan of the way that you phrase it, because that's exactly how I think about it as well. Dave Trott has a saying where he says advertising isn't marketing, advertising is the voice of marketing. So it conveys this idea that first you need to figure out, like, what are you actually trying to say, what are you trying to accomplish, and then you use the creative to communicate that. And I think that's a fine distinction, because when it comes to creative, the way we use creative in our neck of the woods, there's this economic quality, this economic feedback loop, which needs to be in place. So when it's art and you create a beautiful painting, that painting can be great in and of itself, but in advertising, that you can't make a great ad that doesn't actually sell, that doesn't actually move product. So there's this economic quality which is tied to it. So I like how you phrase it, where it's like, okay, first define the business purpose, the business objective, and then use creative in order to communicate that. That's something where I feel like a lot of scientists drop the ball, where it's like, okay, our job is to separate what's true from what's fiction, and even that is debatable nowadays. There's so much baloney with publication bias and the incentive structure in academia, but whatever. But then usually they end there, and I feel like you have only just begun when you're there, because there's a huge variety of ways in which you can communicate the thing that you have discovered. And that, to a large extent, is essentially what advertising concerns itself with. So if you look at like the old car ads from, like the 80s and the 90s, where, you had like extremely knowledgeable people, Bernbeck, Ogilvy, that were very smart about how do we want to communicate a certain thing, versus like the car ads now, which are just so insanely dry and dull and boring, interchangeable.
So I attribute a lot of the communication today, and I'm only going to be 40 next year. So the stuff I've learned is from people like Dave Trott and older people. And I apply a more contemporary approach now for relevancy, but really nothing's really different. You still have the foundation principles. It's just that for some reason, people are trying to change that.
Bernbeck actually said something along those lines in an interview, where he says human nature doesn't change. And it's this idea that like the vehicle changes, and small, like
absolutely the vehicles, that's what it is. And I use that terminal or that word a lot in stuff I write and interviews I've done, because that's what it is. One of the interviews I did in the past, I used Heineken as an example, where Heineken doesn't sell beer on the brand side. That's a business side. What Heineken does is they sell whatever Heineken means to them, and it aligns with the consumer. But that comes later. I think Dave Trott said it too. You don't build a story now; you build a story later, right? You can't just be selling people stories. You have to sell them something valuable. And how you do that is because you cannot sell a client or a customer creative. They don't understand how to pay for that. But if you align it to something valuable, business or product or some kind of service, and everything you're doing after that is simply not serving your child food on the table, but you're serving it in a plate. Right.
It's actually really funny that you say that, because I had a behavior design class yesterday where I was giving a lecture, and one of the things that I always cover usually already in the intro to behavior design classes is that behavior design starts with want. What do you want, or what does this? I usually use subject, because subject can mean I or the user or the consumer. But what does the consumer want? And creatives oftentimes, when it comes to doing business and selling their services, focus on should. Like, your website sucks and it should be better. Meanwhile, the guy who is supposed to pay them, they don't experience that pain in the same way. So it's figuring out like what do they already want, and then how can you help them accomplish that. So they want to steal market share from the brand leader, and then it's like, okay, creative can help you achieve that.
Right. Yeah. As someone who is in the art world, I can without trying to defend or moralize that, I can say even the artists, when a collector buys a painting from an artist, they're not necessarily yet to like it. Maybe they do, I don't know, but they're really buying into the value of whatever that value came from. That this artist has all this value, and your work has this value. That's really what they're investing in, because there's a financial value, there's a financial attribution to it, and without that, the art they just like is not necessarily worth anything financially to anyone else. An artist that sells a painting for $70 million, people go, why? And then, but they're looking at the artwork. They're looking at, is this really worth, my child could do this? But as you said, there's an economic component to that, the creativity in our world. there's a economic part to that, and without that, then it's just something pretty, if you want to call it that. But for me, even behavioral science is something that I really admire. I've never studied it. I understand the basics of it, and psychology, all this stuff. What you're doing with all this brand story and brand purpose and all these terms that people use now, it's all coming. It's all, those things only exist because the business value is so much. People some kind of what would you call that? A reason. They're now giving people the social impact of what they're doing. So people then feel it's guilt-free shopping. Let's call it guilt-free shopping, right? I like shoes. I love shoes, but if I buy too many, I'm going to feel guilty because the world is in this chaotic place. But I'm like, no, I like shoes. I have my money I worked for. I want to buy this pair of shoes. I'm not gonna. It's up to me as an individual to know when it's excessive, and possibly when I do my money to help somebody else. That's what makes that okay morally. But I'm not going to feel guilty about buying shoes. But brands now have to align with this kind of thinking, with the wider community, this societal issues, so that people can understand that they do care, and it's hard to say whether they do or not, but let's just say that they do care about these issues, but they're still trying to sell products. They're still trying to sell everything else. And we need to, I don't like altruism is a bad thing for me from that perspective. When a brand does something and it feels too altruistic, I'm like, no, be honest, be upfront. We're a great brand. We want to sell you more stuff, but hey, we will actually contribute to these things as well because we're a community. But you don't want to make the brand too human, as they like to call it, the humanistic brand, because now you're moving away from business. And then if something goes wrong, what do humans do when things go wrong? You have to respond that way as well, as opposed to responding as a business, where let's fix this issue. We're apologizing and trying to get people to love us. One of my favorite moments, though, I have to say, last year was when Adidas had retweeted Nike. I tell the story where Adidas retweeted Nike's Black Lives Matter graphic, and Nike commented on Twitter with a heart. And I said, wow, I've never seen that before. If you're going to be humanistic, in quote marks, then that's how you do it as a company or as a brand. You show publicly that we're interacting, but we're not people. We're a business, but we're interacting with you. We're socializing with you. So I like stuff like that, but I don't want to ever. My perspective on brand design is always a business aspect, and then you write the story later. You write the nice, pretty things. You put it together. You do all these human responses. That's what brand really is for the company. Is how to communicate to people, because the company can't do it. The company is trying to sell. The company is trying to develop products. So the brand is there to say, hey, we can speak to you. We hear your concerns, or you don't like that, we'll tell the company. Basically, that's how I view brand.
What we're talking about right now, that reminds me of something that you're surely familiar with, which is the KFC screw up, where there was a problem, remember, and they switched instead of KFC, FCK, like we fucked up. That was a beautiful way, and
that's clever, right?
Yes,
and
yes,
that's
exactly.
good copywriting.
Yes,
all advertising starts there. The copywriter is so on the play like the designer or the artist, but the copywriter is like let's call it a secret agent getting a briefing. Without that briefing, they have they go there and die. But the copywriter says, hey, this is the headline. That headline now tells the visual the visual. Oh, you're good?
Yeah, I'm good. Something weird happened on my end. Go ahead. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, the copy tells the visual communication how to represent that those words, or how to pair it well. The words is really the guide. It's like a great copywriter can write a sentence and it has so much impact, or to write a paragraph, and you know, they can pick things out, and then you say, all right, this is the visual guide, and then you create that. Because without that guide, you're really just, which most people do, is that they're either copying an ad, the visual aspects, and putting it together, and then they hope that the visual communication will send a message. But even if you have no text on your ad, a copywriter, I promise you, a copywriter developed that ad, because the visual came from those wording. So
someone has to think about the creative.
Yeah. So KFC, all these big brands, the agencies that serve them, that's what they do. A good agency would have a copywriter in that room, and a lot of these people are not always in the meetings. They get the brief from the client and the directors, but then they're like, I don't understand what this is. So it's good to have them there, you know. But they've tried, like, it's had so many good quotes. I read his blog a lot. And George, if I pronounced the last name properly, Tannenbaum, I hope I got it right. So he actually has a really nice blog as well. I think he worked at Gilby in the past, and so he writes now on his observation of then and now. And what I find interesting with all of these seniors, let's call them senior experts, is that they're my senior. They're everybody's senior. They have commonality in nothing's really changed. As you said earlier, we're just using different vehicles.
Yeah.
And this is where we get to things like digital transformation. Everybody's saying it, but it's like, you're not actually transforming anything. You're taking the same old processes and putting them online. Yeah. No, digital transformation should mean that we're doing everything different. The devices are irrelevant. They'll change because they're vehicles. They're delivering something. But we need to think about how we do that, including advertising. How are we going to advertise to people? Is advertising going to be always disruptive? It has to be in some cases, but disruptive negatively meaning nobody likes watching content and an ad interrupts it. So how do we advertise on that without interrupting the experience, right? So that's where my brain is regarding advertising in the future. I don't know how yet, but I'm hoping that it will happen. But I love advertising. I don't even have an ad blocker in my browser. I like to see the ugly ads, the good ads. I'm like, oh, what the hell is that?
When you're doing it professionally, it does help. Yeah. I'm curious, as someone who's proficient in whose expertise lies in brand strategy. What's your take on the distinction between marketing strategy, advertising, and brand strategy? How do you separate those?
Separating them. All right. So, strategy-wise, I mean, it's obviously you need a plan. All right, and all areas needs a plan. I separate them and align them, but first separate them by first understanding. Well, as did we say it earlier? All right, so we define a business objective. Mm-hmm. Right. So now we know the overall objective here, what we're trying to do. Yeah. Then we have to now develop Actually, I have a process. I have a list of processes, but I can't remember them all at heart. So basically, we have to start by defining. Once you define the business objective, we now have to define the strategy for. I would start with the business. Actually, business. Let's call it business development, business and product development. Then I would get to the marketing. The strategies are developed based on individual purposes, and we set different objectives. So marketing now has to develop a strategy, an overall strategy for the company that sales would use to develop their own strategy of actually doing that, making that connection between the consumer. The marketing is the strategy, overall strategy for developing communication, not communication necessarily, about how to get these products or the business itself into the right positioning, or the right places, the right people, right eyes, whichever one you want to use it. Sales now has to take that and say, okay, these are the people you want. We'll develop a strategy for this to get that, to make that happen for you. Brand strategy is, and then the strategies are based on the definitions, of course. So for me, I don't want to speak for everybody. Brand strategy is based on the purpose of what brand is. And brand's primary purpose is representing and communicating on behalf of the company and the people, mindsets of the people there. It represents all of this. So the strategy of brand now is kind of borderlining into advertising strategy, because now we're trying to communicate, whether it's visual or audio, written. These are all branding for me, as people call it. Branding is really the strategy. Branding is communication. I don't use branding at all.
Does that mean in your view that branding strategy is synonymous with marketing strategy, or is there a difference between how you think of them?
I don't synonymous. I think I would say that the branding strategy directs the marketing strategy.
I see.
Because let's do the process then. How about, if you don't mind, I can do the process.
Sure.
So we define we have gone through business and product development, and now we have a quality offering overall. We have quality product. We are confident that this is a solution or a need that people want. They will buy it. That's the objective there. Now we go into defining what all of this is and how we represent it. That's the brand definition process. Once you define what this is, what is Pepsi? What is Coca-Cola? Now we have a brand. It's an intangible, but it's a perception. We have something and say, this is how we want to be seen. Then we take that, going to the branding strategy. Not only brand has a strategy, there's branding strategy. The branding is, as I said, for me, I don't say I do branding. I say I do brand design and development, because branding is a component under all of that. It's a process of developing strategies in communication, ways to represent the brand. Because the brand is not tangible, so we have to find ways of getting people to understand what the brand is, and that power of the brand. The brand definition comes from understanding and defining what the company and business are. So until we get there, right? So now we are into branding, and we're developing strategies around how do we represent all of this, and what's the right vocabulary, what's the right imagery, visual, and what's the right sound. Sound design is such an important part of this too. What's the right sound that we want, and so now you have your branding strategy. Now marketing has to. This is where I guess you said synonymous. This is where it merges, where marketing now has that overall strategy of selling. The sales really is the closing, if you want. For me, it's the closing. So marketing is really developing the ways of selling. This is why I put in my ideal world, there would be creative design, business, and marketing, not sales. Sales automatically for me falls in marketing. So those are the departments I would have. So you go through those processes. So the business definition, then the creative process, then the design process, and then business and marketing. That's how I like to call. That's what I like to put those. Yeah, I'll put it together.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, why are creative and design separate? Because usually design.
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Or do you mean by creative the people who come up with the translation of the business purpose into it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then
so when really separating is more the process. That they're probably the same area. It's just a process.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
If I develop the product and we need packaging, I'm most likely going to explore creative expressions of this What are the and it's interchangeable. Maybe in packaging, you might want to design how the form follows function. So I believe in that holistically, that form follows function. If I had a product, then I may need to figure out first, before I get to creative, how do we secure this product into this container? Safest way to do it. It's stable, can be shipped, all of this, and then you have to know that's where the wrapping part comes in. And I say wrapping, I don't necessarily mean physically wrapping it. I'm just saying that's the
like emceeing, like you don't know me.
It's like all right, let's make this container look visual appeal. That's what I mean. Shelf positioning. What is it? How would we make this stand out on the shelf? It's a container. What makes it different? We have to know. Take the brand perception into consideration. We have to take this is why the brand guides are important. A lot of people don't like brand guides because they consider them fluff, but this is what a brand guide is. You take elements from it and you make the packaging visually appealing to the consumer. The first interaction the consumer will have is seeing it, and then from there the goal is to get them to actually grab it or touch it or something. So creative and design, as you said, they're in the same area, but the process-wise can be interchangeable. I might have to design a box first before I get creative with the expression.
I got a bottle of chewing gum right here.
Right, very
Sport Life, Holland, Netherlands.
Yeah, okay.
So from a branding and a packaging perspective, are there what is interesting to you about this, or what stands out? There are distinctive assets here, the typography, the font. What are some things that you think suck about this, or that you think are actually really good about this?
So honestly,
Butterfingers.
let me get my the direct part out of the way first. It feels very dated. That's the first impression I get. Because, and then I don't know what the brand is.
Chewing gum.
So
most people will know, but just
right, exactly. So this is where I'm getting to. So it says Sport Life, but the branding. Oh, okay. It's like a chewing. Okay, get it.
Chewing gum.
So right, the branding there that I'm looking at. It seemed like it's either a well-known company. They don't seem to have to focus so much on their branding and the visual appeal. People just know who they are and buy it. That happens in well-known markets, like products. But the packaging itself is not very interesting to me. But I do see Sport Life. I don't necessarily get sport from it, but it feels more medical. It feels like it looks like tablets. I don't know if are they in the pharmaceutical sector, or is it's regular chewing gum?
It's regular chewing gum. I'm not sure where they sell this particular brand, Sport Life.
Right.
If they sell it in the United States or whatever, I have no idea. But their creative resembles Red Bull a lot, in the sense that it's called Sport Life, and you're constantly seeing snowboarders. They're using
really?
In their advertising.
And they got
it's one of the brand leaders. I'm sorry, yeah.
No, it's interesting you said all of that. They sound really strong, but that packaging does not say any of that.
I see. Yeah. Is there like one or two things that you can that you would advise this particular company that you would like to see? Maybe you're like the way that they package it in a jar. It's quite popular nowadays. So maybe in your mind that wouldn't be distinctive enough, or something else that comes to mind.
It's not. I wouldn't stop if I saw it on a shelf unless I knew it. Let's put it that way.
That's what I like about Pringles, by the way. Like they use that can format as a distinctive asset in a time where all crisp chips manufacturers were doing bags.
Do you know the history of Pringles?
I do, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
interesting that
The dude was a chemist, I believe. I'm not
yeah,
entirely sure.
but
Something like that.
they had to change it from chips. They used to say chips, I believe, and they say
Uh,
crisp now because the potato chips companies would have sued them or wanted to, I believe, if I
wow.
remember it correctly. So
Pettiness level
yeah,
1000.
they're like, you don't make
Next up.
potatoes.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Actually, better
but
for
yeah, so
UK markets.
so this is what I love about this. Even the question you just asked me about that packaging, the container, the container is you can probably find several of those, but
Yes.
you can change
Yeah.
that. You can change a container by how it looks, and
Yeah.
people say, "Wow," and they may even keep it, yeah, because it's
I
reusable.
I actually haven't seen cubes, so like perfect
Mhm.
cubes or something.
Right.
For me as a consumer, that might be something that in to use Professor Kahneman's
Mhm.
terminology, System One, which is the automatic fast state of reasoning which consumers are usually in when they're engaging in
Yeah.
consumer buying behavior.
Yeah.
This in a cube might be something that would be interesting to my
Mm.
system one brain, and
Yeah.
perhaps people who are watching this or listening to this at a later point in time might be like, nah, that's nonsense. However, for a lot of people, simply putting chewing gum in a jar was something
Mhm.
that was distinctive enough and triggered their their brain, excuse me, in such
Or
a way where they were like,
familiarity.
hey, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it could be familiarity as well, but the type of container.
Yeah, yeah. Right now it is. Right now it is. But
Right.
but it's at least in Holland, it's relatively new. You used to always have chewing gum in like the small packets with like always 10 or 12, and then you popped
Yeah.
one out and you ate it. And
Right.
then they used the jar. I'm not. It's always a little bit tricky to accurately discern the correct motivations from the post facto rationalizations. So I'm not
Mhm.
entirely sure how much a container played a role in my
I
purchasing
can take a
behavior.
guess. Yeah.
But one of the reasons why I personally use jars and like jars is simply because of the volume that it holds. So it might be more utilitarian. But I suspect that it would influence me when I'm not in like entrepreneurial scientist mode. When
Right.
I simply because it stands out. If everyone is selling a packet and you're the only one with the jar, it's something that is unique. It is quite
That's
interesting.
that is exactly the key point there. That's exactly what it is. The fact, or so that's what I was saying. That they're either familiar brand, or the shelf positioning actually
Yeah,
affects manufacturing a lot. So
yeah,
chances are that branding was not the focus.
yeah,
The focus was the manufacturing and product development. And then they said, let's put this branding on it. They based on what you just said, you say it's not common there either. It's not a common thing. The jar, it sounds like.
it is
So
now. It is now. 5 years ago,
exactly.
it wasn't.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah. Now,
they introduced something new and volume. Of course, people are always trying to spend money that they want more for their money in any form. Even if they're not getting it, it feels that way. That's definitely a manufacturing and sales driven decision. The branding was not the focus. I still don't know what the brand is, but it says Frozen at the top. I don't know if that's the brand. I don't know what the brand is. I
yeah,
don't know who it is.
yeah. That's
Right.
not good actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, the brand is Sport Life, and I have no idea why it says Frozen or why they chose
Right.
to write it FROZR
Yeah.
or
It's all
FROZN. I mean, without the E.
yeah. Yeah.
And then yeah, this is deep mint, and they also have ice mint, and I have no idea what the difference
The
is.
colors don't say any of that. You know,
No, I believe one is.
it's trapped between that the I don't see sport. I didn't know it was gum. It looks medical, like something I
Yeah,
buy in a pharmacy. Tablets. That's what it looks like. But
yeah,
again, like I said, when you have a strong brand, unfortunately, sometimes that does happen. The focus becomes now on the distribution and not so much the branding. But a strong brand is only as strong as the business anyway.
that's
Uh,
true.
they this is a nice analogy I like to use. I don't know if I use it already, but so when it comes to scenarios like this, or how I like to define branding is consumers don't care, but do it anyway. And here's why. You can eat your food or serve food to your child on a table.
Yeah.
But it looks better in a plate and feels better in a plate. Whether that's conditioning or how we grew up or not, that's really what the branding is. It's like, it's consumers would not notice a lot of things that you've put in, but it does contribute to why they buy it. And but it all starts with the quality of the product.
That reminds me of yes, yeah, oh yeah, I agree. That reminds me of back in whenever before supermarkets became popular, how you used to ask a grocery fella like, give me 100 grams of rice or whatever, and he scooped it up and put it in a paper bag and then brought it to you. So there was no branding. But then eventually you got supermarkets, etc. So there was a need to find a way to differentiate yourself or make yourself distinctive compared to an identical product right next to you. Because if both of you have the exact same brown paper bag or the exact same thing in which your product resides, then it becomes difficult for the consumer to recognize you are you. So at that point, branding started becoming much more important. And I like the analogy you used. There are some psychological studies, although I haven't looked into whether or not they've been replicated, etc. But there are some psychological studies that I've seen which point to the notion that food tastes differently depending on the plates that you use, or if you're eating a McDonald's like out of the cardboard container, or you put it on a plate, like the exact same food, is simply changing the ambience. The same thing with wine. Are you consuming it at home in like a regular glass? From a purely rational perspective, it makes no sense that wine glasses exist. Why not? This is a perfectly fine glass for everything except like something that's really hot. But you can make the identical version, and then all liquids can be in the inside of this container. But you have so many different glass vehicles, quote unquote, for different kinds of liquids. But it influences how a consumer perceives it. Wine out of this would be extremely weird, extremely bizarre, almost like you're drinking like a soda.
and
so there's the inverse as well, like soda in a wine glass.
Yeah, exactly. This is what we so you're getting into experience, and experience is a very controversial topic because when COVID came, everybody started to make jokes about how marketers are going to sell experience since everybody's distanced and whatnot. And that wasn't the point of experience. Experience is not necessarily something physically you have to physically experience all the time. Experience is whatever you're participating in, how does it make you feel? And the wine glass, there's a little history behind that. Obviously, glass makers also have their own artistic take on different things. And then beer has their own thing. Scotch, I'm a Scotch drinker. I traditionally, I don't know if it's because of how I was introduced to Scotch, but you always have it in the Scotch glass, right? You don't put it. But then if I'm with my friends, I really don't care. I'll just drink it from whatever is available, because when you don't have your Scotch glass,
a coffee mug,
you don't have your wine glass and your Scotch glasses or your beer mugs, you drink from whatever is there, right? Because that's your desires to have the product. But when you're in a certain setting, you want to maintain the appearance and the experience of drinking wine and drinking Scotch properly. But then the connoisseurs will obviously tell you why they drink from this and why they do from that. Beer, I think some beer glasses have a laser etch on the base of it that creates these bubbles, which helps to release the hops. I guess the bubbles pop on the surface, so you smell it, because part of taste is your smell. So it creates a different experience.
Even if there was one, I don't know if it's true, but let's assume that it's actually 100% true. Even if it were false, that would be an incredible story.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if they tested it. I don't know if they tested it, but that's what they sold it. Right?
Yes.
They said that they did the laser edge. I think it was Samuel Adams. They did the laser edge or something. One of those brands to help release the hops, right?
Yes.
And I was like,
part of the way that I look,
part of your taste, but I don't remember even trying to smell like, I just drank my beer. Right?
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Yes. To me, it kind of feels like dating when you're single and you're with a woman and you want to go home and and escalate it and right. prepare yourself for sexy times.
Right.
You need a reason. You get it's way too forward to be like, hey, let's go home and get down to business. So you need it needs to be something like, hey, do you want to watch a movie? And even that right now is a little bit too forward, but
Right.
And I feel like in consumer behavior, the exact same thing is going on. People want to buy the glass, but you need to give them a reason.
That's exactly what it is. Dave Trott gave that example through a really brilliant story. Why can't I remember that story? I think it was with one of those famous American a tale. One of those I don't want to get it wrong, but he told a story. It was something like a Civil War, something, I don't remember this guy's name. And the story was told about this guy. But interestingly, the actual story, what actually happened was different. The story was told much later on, after he did what he did. So what Dave was saying with that was that the reason that you give people to buy the stories and stuff, that comes way later. You actually have to do all this other stuff first, and then you have a story that you can tell, and you give them that reason to buy this thing, and you a month super mop. Let's just they have shown you why the super mop is better. They've shown you why it works. And I'm assuming there's some science behind that's to support that reason. But then they show you visually that it does clean pretty well. It's lighter than a traditional mop, and you don't have to do all that squeezing and wringing and whatever of the water in the bucket. But that's a solution to something, yes, and people will buy it. But then now, what do you do after you've tapped out, right? You have to now give them the Douglas Davis said this in his book Creative Strategy and the Business of Design. You have to give them the value, the benefit and the value. That's what you focus on: objective benefits and the value. You're really, which is what I was saying with Heineken. They're really selling the beer is good, so everybody loves it. But now they're selling something else because they have confidence in their product. They don't have to sell the product anymore. They just put the logo, and people say, "Oh, that's Heineken. I'm going to buy that." Yeah. So what you're doing is you're defining benefits and leveraging the value of that benefit to the consumer. Yeah. So you have to have that. That's where the business objective again. Set an objective, define the value, and the benefits, and that's what people are buying now. Years ago, they're buying Cola. Now they're buying Coca-Cola or Pepsi. They've bought into the brand. The products are already established, so they're no longer trying to sell you the cola. They're just selling you the brand. But the brand, it's interchangeable. They're buying both, but they're not buying they bought into the brand, but they're not spending money on the brand per se. They're still buying the products. Let's just put it that way. It's like, no matter what happens, my product is good, they'll buy it. But it feels better to them to be a Coca-Cola, to have loyalty to Coca-Cola than Pepsi, because whatever they align Coca-Cola with in their life, their lifestyle, Coca-Cola fits that, or Pepsi fits it. And then there's a Dr. Pepper. So where does that fit, right? Where does Dr. Pepper fit in all of this? Because there are people who believe Dr. Pepper aligns with their lifestyle better, but at the end of the day, there's different types of cola. and you're either cola, you're either a cola customer, or you're a Sprite customer. A citrus. What's this called? What do you call that? Is actually don't know the name for all the sodas. I just realized that it's cola, right?
Yeah,
but I don't know what's it called. Maybe like orange soda.
Pepsi and Coca-Cola, for example.
Yeah. So maybe orange soda. So maybe you like orange soda. You don't like cola. So that's your soda, and that's what you buy for the rest of your life because that aligns with what you like. But then Fanta makes that. So you're like, oh, I like Fanta. And Fanta always has these cherry bubbly ads. That's me. And you buy it. But at the end of the day, you're just really buying products that you like. But you just have preferences in the brand. Is what makes Quaker different oats to buy from another oats company. And then people probably buy those granola clusters over Quaker oats because they prefer that. But the brands behind it, the brand is a default. You can't get away from brands. You automatically if you do a product, the next step for you by default is how do I get this people? How do I let them understand what it is and who we are? And that's what brand and branding is. It's like define the brand, define your branding, and it's now you're communicating. You can't get away from it. Brands are formed organically. Let's just say that. Our job is just to define them. We don't create the brands. They're being formed as the company grows. People get familiar with it. That's the brand forming there. The perception is being formed. Incidentally, regarding your date, your courting with a woman, Martin Umar actually, I believe he said it. Marketing is how you court you court your customer. You're dating them, and branding is how you keep the relationship interesting. And I like that because that's actually very humanistic. But it's not necessarily turning the brand into a human being. It's just that that's actually what's happening. Yo Santosa, she said branding is is making people fall in love. So we have all these different phrases that we use, but really what it is what you just said. It's a dating. You're courting someone, and then when they finally say, all right, you've worn me down. Here I am. Now you can keep it interesting, or they leave you. That's what the branding is. But the product and business development is always happening because that's innovation. That's how you keep value growing, right? But so you can't get away from any of the stuff that people argue about on Twitter. it's branding is relevant. Business is relevant. They can't live without each other. You just have to. The brand side of it is just really the relationship that you form with the consumer, and keeping it interesting. But none of it means anything if you don't have good business and development, business management, and product development. That's just how I view it.
It's always a bit tricky to. I wanted to say it's always a bit tricky to draw a clear distinction between where marketing stops and branding begins. Even in the literature, I wrote a very in-depth essay a while ago where I essentially answered the question of every company is doing marketing. How do you actually measure whether or not your marketing is working? Which is kind of important. Otherwise, you have no idea. What are you doing? Is it working, or are you just having fun essentially and wasting money?
I think a lot of people are just having that.
but in their defense, as an entrepreneurial scientist who does this professionally, even for me, it takes a lot of time and energy and investment of resources in order to figure out what's actually true and what's actually baloney. So I empathize with people who are running a company full time, and are reading books on the side, because there's so much more noise compared to signal in the entrepreneurial scene, which includes marketing and branding versus mathematics. If you want to learn mathematics, all you have to do is pick up a book and you can immediately start. But with marketing, there's just so much garbage that you don't know. And by the time you finally do have the capability to sort what is true and what is nonsense, you are already a level above that by implication. Because in order to recognize that something is baloney, you need to have sufficient knowledge to know what's true and what's nonsense. So by the time that you have that ability, you no longer need the knowledge which is in that book. So you are most vulnerable when you don't know anything. But as I was writing that essay, a part of it was a quick little lexicon section which covered the terminology that we needed to use, because in mathematics, one of the first things that you do is define a concept such that everyone has the same understanding of a particular thing, and that's rarely the case. Even in academia, there are so many papers where people are talking about a certain construct and then complaining about how everyone uses a different definition. So I published that piece on marketing. It was true for marketing. Even something as simple as what is the definition of marketing. I'm writing a piece now on first mover advantage. How important is it? What are the key determinants? In which environment does it matter? In which environment is less important? And even that thing, first mover advantage, among academics, there's a discussion as to what it actually means, what it doesn't mean. So that always makes it a bit complicated when we're talking about marketing and branding, like making sure that everyone is on the same page.
Well, I mean, marketing is always in play, in my opinion. It's always in play, marketing, because it's just a full-time job. Even if you're not hiring an agency for it, you're always trying to find ways to get your company known to somebody else. So marketing is always in play. It's just whether the strategy is defined enough to target the right areas that you need. Because it's really, marketing is leveraging differences, benefits, all this stuff. That's what the marketing is. The sales is just trying to close that gap. But at the same time, everything you just said is why I'm even in this industry. I'm not in it for the rewards, as I like to call it, the results. I love the process of discovering solutions to complicated problems, and because simplicity is often confused with minimalist or minimalism. I think it's a word. Simplicity is really about the functions, how we do things. The minimalist mind is a way of thinking, and we often confuse that, which is why advertising gets so disconnected at times. Everybody wants to do the Apple ads, or print ads, but then you're like, no, but that's Apple is using minimalism to communicate the simplicity of their products. I don't know if they're all simple, but that's the idea, is that our products are easy to use. So that's what they're trying to do there. But you can't take that now and apply it to your company if your product is not simple to use, and that's okay. Some products are not. Some products in some industries are pretty complex things. But complexity.
And if everyone around you is simple, then you can use that as a means of separating yourself from the crowd. These are all very simple, but do you want something that's simple and underpowered, or are you a pro? Are you a professional who needs etc.? And now you position yourself like
always. And even the complex machines, they're all trying to find simple ways for people to use them. What a consumer wants is to press one button, everything happens. That's what they want. We haven't arrived there yet, but that's what they want. And that's what people are doing every day. They're trying to find, how can we make this easier? And, once you get through that's a process I love. What an entrepreneur, or let's call it a venture agency, would be, an ideal venture agency, as I've heard it said, is if you could get NASA as an agent, if you can get NASA's model, right, into a simpler form that everyday people can understand. NASA is funded, so they put money into different things, including education, product development, innovation, different areas. What a lot of agencies don't have, if you're really trying to help people, is they don't have, which is something I'm trying to work on. That's my ideal agency anyway. Is they don't have that experimental phase. They don't have that in the background, what's happening before we get to this. We should be at a point where we're creating solutions before clients, consumers even think about it. And then we can either attach that to things they already have as our existing clients and say, hey, we actually did this innovation. Are you interested in learning about it? We think it could help your company. Or we're putting our own stuff to market. What would an agency that developed its own phone look like? Is it on a different platform? Are they jumping onto existing platforms? But agency in advertising is different from agency or brand agency. Agency just really means management. So when you say agency, in this context that I'm talking about, we're talking about an agency that still manages clients, but their research and development, which is a very important part to any company, their research and development is focused on their clients' consumer problems, as opposed to just what would you call it? Putting on print ads and different things. And I don't want to make it complicated. I don't want to do that. An advertising agency does advertising. I'm just saying, if you wanted to have a relationship, you'd have an agency that focuses on design solutions. Or the agency itself could have a design department that focuses on that. And I would just label that research and development, which would include creative, design, and everybody in that area. And I think that would help entrepreneurs a lot, because there's a guy actually did something similar, Quirky.com, years ago. I don't know if it's still around. He had developed an MP3 player. They went to an expo, and I don't know if somebody said to them, we need a case. They don't have a case, and they just wrote on a cardboard, make our case and get a free whatever, win a free MP3 player. This is at around time of when the iPod and stuff were just coming out, I think. But then he said a kid just did a design that looked like a bottle opener, sketched it out, and like a teenager. And they said, "Oh, we love that," and they got it made. And he said he loved the process of developing that whole thing more than he loved the fact that he created an MP3 player. And he started Quirky.com. What Quirky.com does is that they get investors. I don't know I don't know how it works in the background, but the model is this: you have an idea, you would present it to Quirky.com, whether I think you upload they have their liability stuff. And then they would now, if they like the idea, they think it can be something that can go to market, they would take that idea and present it to investors, and investors will invest in it. And I believe they do the entire process, including the branding and everything, but mostly they actually get the prototype made. Prototyping is a big problem for entrepreneurs. A lot of them don't have the access or ability to test their ideas. Right. So I go to expos when we're physical, and I would see these new companies. I'm like, how did I not know this was happening? And the branding is a lot of the branding is horrible. I don't understand it. But I'm like, how did you get this printed? And who designed this stuff for you? You have a product here, but I've never heard of you until now. But it seemed like you have a whole full brand identity. But I didn't tell them this. But none of them are aligned to what they're doing. They went to maybe a graphic service or a printing company, and they got some graphics done. And that's what happens to entrepreneurs. They build their ideas out, and the only test they have is the expo. We're actually selling it. They go there to sell their idea, and I don't know how much experimental process took place before that. How much testing happened, and especially in Jamaica, we don't have a lot. I don't think there's. I wouldn't describe Jamaica as a place of prototype, because the manufacturing is really small in terms of what we make here. So a lot of people with ideas, they don't have that ability to test it. And I think that's why I like Quirky.com. That guy was onto something. He that snake, the strip line, power strip, but it's snakes. It can be made into a snake line. It bends. That was from Quirky.com, and it was when it got big. Somebody just had an idea and they sketched it out and they got it made for them. Okay, so they take a share.
So let me ask you this. I have a lot of bootstrappers in my audience, guys who are at a very early stage in their company, or maybe a bit more advanced and doing quite well for themselves. However, how important is it for them to, start thinking about branding, and at what point exactly does branding come into play, and do you need to start thinking about it? I realize that this might be a little bit like asking your barber, do I need a haircut? But, but just take it however you want.
I think the easy answer would be immediately start thinking about what you want to be or how you want to be seen. But I would not suggest that until you know what you're doing. Meaning, so if I am developing a product and I know what I'm trying to achieve with this product, until focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
Then now you have to figure out the business side of it. What's going to happen now that we have a product? How are we going to get this out? Once you start to build, once you get into the business side, then you can start thinking about branding. If you're still developing product, don't think about anything about brand or branding. Once you get to the business and you have a business that you're trying to sell the product, then you get into that's when you start thinking about
even pre-revenue, in your opinion.
No, well, you know what? This is just a general guide. Let's just call it that. Some people actually know what they want to do and who they want to be before they, once the idea even popped in their heads.
Uh-huh.
If you're there, you can start doing all of this, aligning all this. Just make sure your product is proper, because then all of that's going to fail. And make sure your business is solid, because again, your brand is gonna if your business fails, everything fails. So that's why I always, even clients, established clients, when they come to me, I always ask them about the business stuff first. I have to analyze the business and the product. I have to see if they need actually undergo business development, not marketing. Especially if they're well known, they think they want to change their logo. I'm like, why? Unless it sucks, I'm going to ask you why. And even then, I might ask why. But point is, sometimes it's business development that's the problem, not marketing. And sometimes they just need a different way of serving the customer, not necessarily. And this is why brand services extend beyond the visual communication. If you're really helping people, brands and businesses, then you're really trying to help them to serve the consumers better. Sometimes the solution to that is getting a new POS system. I've seen it, right? And then it changes everything. People are happy, and then you can say, okay, now we can look at your brand. But this is what the partnerships are. That's what I have with partnerships with people who work in different industries, that I can say, hey, a client is looking for a solution in this area. I think they should do this before they get a branding. I mean, of course, I collect my fee for doing this service, but I'm not being paid for doing brand at that time. I'm just trying to help the client before I get to that. So entrepreneurs like that, bootstrapping is such a bothersome thing for me, but I understand why. It's like, in my head, if I can build the right relationships with a good idea, I can find a way to get somebody else to do the things I cannot do. But bootstrapping is so strenuous, and I wish there was a way to get entrepreneurs to not have to do that. But I understand the reality of it. But because they're bootstrapping, I would not get into branding until you have a business model, because now you can sell something. And the first step to that, actually, especially if you don't have a lot of capital, is definitely think about how you want to represent this business you're doing with this product offering or service offering. But it's get a deck together, so you can investors invest in you. That's what really good investors, they're investing in you, the entrepreneur, because they expect more ideas in the future. So it's good to get a deck together once you've done your first product development and you have a business idea. Get a deck together, so you can present it to when you find that right person to build a relationship with, present it to them, and they can help you get the investments you need to grow, to have that exponential growth into the business. But
my take on that is actually my take on that, and this is again where which is a reoccurring theme in entrepreneurial science, where it matters a lot, like how you define a particular term. But if I use the way the literature looks at branding, in terms of distinctive assets, yada yada yada, all that stuff. For me, that doesn't really come into play unless we're like talking about more established, bigger firms, deeper wallets, a longer reputation. We're talking something on the order of 5 to 10 years, maybe.
Exactly.
So yeah, when I'm talking with bootstrappers, my advice generally is like stay away from it. Don't even worry about it too much, because a lot of these questions can be answered through the lens of marketing. So first, you mentioned business purpose. I agree with that. For me, that flows out of the jobs to be done, essentially. Which can, so if I use this example again, which is a jar, that can flow from the job to be done, which is like a consumer wants 80 pieces of gum, and they don't necessarily want to have like 15 billion packets with like 2 pieces of gum. It's a hassle. A jar just makes more sense. So now you have a container, which a literal container, which flows from the jobs to be done. And then of course there's the way that Marty, which you already mentioned, Marty Neumeyer looks at it, which is a brand isn't what you say, it's what they say, which it is a way that you can look at can look like branding. However, like in academia, usually that definition would typically fall under the marketing lens. So it kind of like depends on how you define marketing, which is probably also the critique that Ritson sometimes has, because he has a very academic view of he uses the academic terminology, and sometimes you can have these conversations which go past each other, which is probably also a little bit what happened with us on Twitter. Very, it's always a bit tricky in this field. In some sense, it's funny. You should almost like start before you even have the Twitter conversation and disagreement agreement. Just like 5 tweets back and forth, establishing like the rules and the parameters.
It was like what, 140 or something characters. So you're like, you're replying, but then you can't say all, so then you're responding to something that I'm not finished, and it was the same. Like I was responding to something you weren't finished saying. I'm like, oh my god,
it's very difficult.
We met at the end. I was like, it's the same thing.
What I dislike the most, a year or maybe 5 years or so ago, I wrote something because as someone with an extensive background in behavior science, I understand and appreciate just how much of human behavior is nudged and guided and an artifact of the environment a subject is in. And you see that in Twitter. So one of the conjectures that I have is that one of the reasons why Twitter can sometimes be a little bit hostile, which is something how a lot of people describe Twitter. Dave Chappelle in his latest special with Twitter is not a real place, etc. That's something that you don't hear. That specific critique you don't hear of Facebook. But I feel like the conjecture was that part of it is that when you have that few characters, 280 right now, used to be a 140, there's no room for politeness, because politeness in a sense is a kind of frivolous energy. Instead of saying you're wrong, there's this frivolous energy component to it, where it's like, I understand where you're coming from and you made a few good points. However, I disagree with this specific thing for these various reasons, even though you might be wrong. But here's my thinking. That's a very long, and you're wrong is very concise. But you're forced to, because you're forced to, because you don't have the, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand. It's like it takes up so much space, and then if you have that politeness, which takes up space plus the argument, then you run into the character limit. So usually, like you throw the politeness out of the way, and then you're left, and then it sounds much more harsh than you intended it to. I feel like Twitter kind of forces it.
I like two things about Twitter. I like to one, it allows me to condense my information. I like that about Twitter. Like I have to figure out the shortest way to say this and make a point.
That's true. Yes.
That's true. The other thing is it's entertaining to see people try to do that. So those two things I like. I don't know if you're familiar with Chris though. You've heard of
course.
Him? Yeah, yes. Right. So Chris made a post about how to fire a client, or tweet about how to fire a client. But he made it very condensed, and he skipped out the little details like explaining whether they're paid or not. He just said he just made the the executive, I don't know what's the right word here, but he made the decision to just speak to what's most likely happening, that people have are doing work without being paid
Yes.
first. So he
Yes.
just said, no money has been exchanged.
Yeah.
So we can whatever part ways.
Well, actually.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's what happened.
yeah.
So I shared this understanding why he did what he did. Just my experience. I say, oh, I know why he did that.
Good faith
And
versus bad faith.
There's some people who started to say, what do you mean nobody's exchanged? What do you fire? I don't understand. I'm like, I put his link to the tweet there. So I figured they'd say, oh, it was a tweet. Nobody even paid attention to that. They just wanted to argue about the fact that he said no money has exchanged hands. I was like, come on.
There's a kind of intellectual one-upmanship going on where it's like you don't even disagree, but you're just looking for stuff that you can disagree with to signal intellect. That's actually one of the things that I dislike a bit with the entrepreneurial science scene. Right. So the people who are either in academia or the people who are senior experts, as you refer to them in branding or agency life. Right. It's that being said, that's like the only minor critique I have, because it's vastly better than the maker community, which is it's like just like LinkedIn, all the inauthenticness, the fakeness, the toxic positivity, the follow for follow strategies, and all the nonsense, and then unfollowing everybody for mental health, even though it's just you're just gaining the system. Commenting very quickly on everyone, not because you're leaving a genuine comment, because you're being a leech and a fucking parasite and hoping to get some of the audience. So oh man,
my algorithm.
Disgusting people.
I love my social media experience. I keep telling people. I hear people complaining on Facebook. They're like, "Oh, I don't like Facebook anymore," and I'm thinking, "But you're still here," kind of thing. But for me, like, I love my social media. You know what? I'm either entertained by something that disrupted my feed, but my feed generally only has one specific focus, because the algorithm, I only interact with people like you or content that I want.
Same. Same.
It only has that. When the other problems, I don't get it. I don't get
exactly. And also blocking and muting aggressively. So there, because the platform. So we mentioned how in behavior design, this is referred to as either environment or context, right. Depending on a few things. However, the context is hugely important in nudging behavior, which we just discussed. And obviously here the algorithm is optimized for things like indignation, because human behavior, it thrives on that. If you post something which is highly nuanced, no one gives a shit. But if you post something which is very divisive, which is part of the reason why it's so common in marketing, people really jump on it. So blocking people who like or who create that stuff, that also helps, because then you lose those people out of your feed. And when people like something, then it shows up in your Twitter as well. So I tend to like throw these people out as well, because I've noticed. And this is very common in behavior design, where you treat behavior designs as cooking. You don't know ex ante whether or not you'll like something. So you cook it, you taste it, and then you use that feedback to make an adjustment. So a big part of it is like not judging yourself and just trying it and seeing what happens. And one of the things that I noticed for myself, which I disliked, is that I what's the expression that they use? The cool kids, like eating the bait or something. So I saw something, and it created this. And I'm taking the bait. I see something which sparks this feeling of indignation, and then I have to leave a reply. And eventually, I was just like, there's no upside to this. So I just started like blocking those people. It's better. But the point that I wanted to make about the entrepreneurial science community with respect to the intellectual one-upmanship is that oftentimes there's it's like wearing a seatbelt, where it's safer 99.9999999% of the time, but simply because of the sheer volume of human beings who are driving a car, multiplied by the amount of times that they are driving the car, throughout their lifetimes, that number of instances, that quantity is through the roof. So even if you have a trivially small percent of situations in which not wearing a seatbelt is safer,
Right.
multiplied by that big number still gives you something on the order of 100,000 or a million cases. It's so you don't have to look hard to find an exception to the situation where not wearing a seatbelt is smarter. However, when you post something, and I'm using the seatbelt as a metaphor, where it's like you have an agreement in the entrepreneurial science community that this is the right way to go, wear your seatbelt. Then it's like, well, actually, it depends, because here's the situation, and it's like, dude, that's such an exception within an exception within an exception. But they are. Yes, and those people know that, but it's not even about pointing that out or adding something to the conversation. It's purely signaling how smart they are, and I think a lot of that is going on, where you're interpreting something not in good faith. It's not. I'm going to respond to what I think Phillip J actually said. I'm interpreting this precise statement and giving a critique such that I am perceived to be smart. And I think a lot of that is going on, which is also tremendously annoying and unhelpful.
I think the idea of being smart is also taking place in marketing a lot. People saying stuff because they want to have that feeling of being smart, so the client can know what they're talking about, and sometimes they don't. But it's interesting that you mentioned that exception to the rule. So have you ever, I'm sure you have, you're familiar with restrictive domain errors and narrative errors, right? This is the plague of humanity, right? You said something, but I'm going to give you an example that I know happened, and somehow this is going to be fact and it's going to apply to everything, but your point is actually correct on the premise that this is the usual behavior. And I'm going to say no. I'm going to probably know. So that's the restricted domain, is that I believe in something and I'm not willing to let that go. I'm stuck there. And then to keep that in the argument, so I can control the argument, right? I have to make sure that I'm in control. I'm going to use examples, extreme examples, exceptions to the rule, to say, no, well, this happened and this is the best way, but I haven't given you any proof or any supporting facts as to why this is better. And then when that doesn't work, I'm not going into the narratives. Such and such said X, or they say, or nothing. It's all in my mind, and I'm trying to live up to that belief, but there's nothing that proves it right. And this happens in conversations a lot.
It's the my Uncle John smoked this entire life argument. He doesn't have therefore you can smoke, you don't have to worry about getting cancer.
Right. Yeah. So it's that's exactly
and stories and stories also hijack the brain, because they're much more they lend themselves better to behavior change versus like cold, hard, boring statistics. Which ties into what we were talking about in the very beginning, where it's like first the business purpose, and then how do you actually communicate the business purpose such that you achieve the thing that you're setting out to achieve.
This is the storytelling stuff everybody's selling as well. Everybody is like, whenever I see a lot when they do going to brand design and development, they marketing always says or advises that, or the pitch. I don't like pitching. I don't pitch, but the pitch is always like, we're going to develop your brand story, and we're going to do this and that. And I was thinking, unless this company is at least 10 to 20 years old, I mean, they're established. Mm-hmm. What story are you going to tell exactly? Like, what are you going to develop to compel people to buy this? Should they be focusing on actually just, like we said earlier, defining the product? Product's good? Great. People like it because it works. Move on to now defining the brand identity, specifically, who they are or what they're doing. And then your branding.
How much do you think the consumer cares about brand identity in your experience?
If in my experience, I'm going to be totally honest, and I hope that people don't hate me for this. The consumer probably cares significantly less than you do. Because but it helps. This is the point about eating on the plate versus the table. That's what the brand. That's what I mean. It's like a child doesn't really care where to eat from, but it's the assumption you can have a clean table and eat your food off it, but It just looks better to play, or it feels better because of how you grew up. You want a child to have the same experience. The consumer, they're attracted to things. They're attracted to things. So you find ways of attracting them to whatever it is you're trying to sell them.
Yeah.
And when I say they don't care, I don't mean that they won't recognize it, or they won't, they probably won't care until they have created a pleasant experience with the first time they tried the product or bought the product.
That's a good point.
After that association is formed, they really only care about recognizing you, and that's why you do all the stuff we do.
Distinctiveness and
right. But it's not because they care about how pretty it is, or what. Some do, but again, that's an exception to the rule. The consumer is really just that's what visual appeal is. It's like making sure your package is so attractive, or I like to call it interactive. So when I touch it, it actually even feels, interesting enough as it looks. And now I'm going to buy it because I want to try this thing. And I like the packaging. I've tried the product now. Now I'm loving the product. Now I've created an association with the product, to the brand, to the company. And wherever I see this thing, I'm going to buy it. The logo is just the symbol, nothing else. Your logo can be so ambiguous. A lot of people remember this.
I always like to think of brand as like a heuristic or a mental shortcut for the consumer, especially as a hedge against sucking.
Yeah.
So if you have, and you mentioned, which I think is spot on, where a consumer has an experience with a given brand, and then hopefully, the variability is, the variance is low, such that if they engage with the brand again, they get the same experience. And in that sense, I think one of the reasons, because human beings are much more sensitive to variance on the downside versus variance on the upside. So what that means is that a big fluctuation between mediocre and good is perceived. It gives you much less upside than even a slight variation between mediocre and bad. People they dislike variance towards the negative extremely. So what happens is, if you have a product and a TV, for example, they will prefer purchasing a TV which is like a 7 out of 10 with 100% certainty versus a TV which has a range between 4 and 9 with a 50% certainty, because they are scared. What they want to avoid is that the product sucks. And if you stick with a brand, then you're hedging against that possibility of sucking, because of your previous engagement with that brand, or because of the creative and all of the output that you've seen, which is constantly we are good, and we are for all of these reasons you can trust us. And then there's also which is part of the reason why TV ads work so well, like a public commitment, which is Rory Sutherland's point, a public commitment which doesn't exist when you're using digital and Facebook, or to a lesser extent because of the price point, and because it's cost prohibitive and more exclusive in a sense. So if you combine all of these factors, then it makes it you create the possibility for a consumer to buy a product with a little bit more peace of mind, that they know that I'm not going to give you money and then you're going to take my money and run, or I'm going to buy it and it's going to be a horrible experience.
There's a huge trust. I call these things components. There's a huge trust, and a huge part. Once you've gotten the consumer to buy, it's about trust going forward now. That you have to. So there's 4. I should have really mentioned this earlier. So there's 4 guides I like to use. Or what are they? Processes. So you have awareness, which I think gets mentioned on the tweet and on the spread. There was awareness, knowledge, commitment, and supply chain management. Okay. This is a mixture of both brand and business. The supply chain management is very specific to the business. The brand can only build awareness based on the confidence in the supply chain, because the business has to, once the consumer has tried it, you have to deliver on that or better every time. Right? If it goes down, the first bad experience you have, that's going to spread like wildfire. It's going to be like, yeah. So, once
there's literature on that actually. It's been a while since I looked into it, but I believe the ratio was something like 7-1 or something. Where
it's really fast. Like,
yes,
it's amazing. And you see it on Twitter.
That's a really good point. But even empirically, everyone who's listening or watching this knows that if you have a good experience, the chances of you actually posting it and talking about it are relatively slim, because there is, in a sense, where that's the expected, like the normal. But on the flip side, if it sucks even a little bit, then that typically tends to be like a big deal.
Nobody uses the complaint form anymore. They just tweet it and tag the company.
Yes. Much more complaints on Twitter than raving about a company.
Right. So what happens with so we've established that the other interesting bit regarding the consumer is that people like to, I've heard people, and I say people like to, that's really not a true statement. I've heard people who debated on brand loyalty. And brand loyalty is, again, from that association we just spoke about, but a consumer having accessibility to a product doesn't really mean that they have no brand loyalty. If you're looking from a financial side, then your sales are going to be, this consumer has stopped buying for a while. But that's brand loyalty. Like I said, brand doesn't really sell anything. It contributes to that whole thing, but brand doesn't sell, it represents. So when I am in the middle of somewhere that is far from my usual, maybe I moved, I don't know. I'm somewhere and I can't find, I like to use Pepsi and Coca-Cola. They're so big. So when I can't find Pepsi, I'm gonna buy Coca-Cola because I like cola, right? But if I saw Pepsi, I'd definitely pick Pepsi up, right? And that's what brand loyalty is. But because the spend might be more on Coca-Cola based on where somebody lives, they debate on this idea or the notion of brand loyalty. And I'm like, brand loyalty is still there. They just don't have access to it. Distribution is really what the other company would have over the other, or one brand would have over the other. But remember, these are companies playing in the same space, and the brands just represent them. So distribution, supply chain, all these things. This is business management. And without effective business management, chances are you're not going to have great brand management. Supreme is an exception to every rule I can think about in terms of brand design and everything. Supreme is so large, but they didn't necessarily follow any other rules, I guess, that you'd go about brand because of how they are formed, and they grew from their products and their presence and the activities that used to do.
Skater brand in origin, or not?
Yes, it's hard to say. I can't confidently say they're a skater brand, but they definitely start putting stickers on skateboards.
Okay.
And they start making their own stuff.
Yes.
And it's still one location in the world. It's just so big, but it's still the store is still there in the same place it started. And I think they license out. I think they do licensing now, like license deals, like deals with partnerships and stuff like that.
Well, what are you aware of? What caused the blow up with Supreme?
I read and watched documentaries on it. I just can't remember all the details, but I call it it's a paradoxal brand. The origins of it was something. I don't know why all these names are missing me today. There's an actress at the time who said something, or they said something about the actress. So it's born out of a negative comment, essentially. That's why I call it the paradox. Right? It was not supposed to be what it is today. There are some guys having some fun, and I like those kind of brands because they were so focused on enjoying what they're doing that it grew and became an actual large brand competing on the same stage with all these old companies from years ago, right? But they're so valuable that if they put a logo on, which they have, on a brick, people.
I've seen it. Right? I've seen it. Any lessons? Yeah. That's true. Any lessons other companies can steal from what they've done?
Oh yeah, there's lots. I just you know what? You should probably do a nice article on that. There's a lot of stuff you can learn from Supreme. Don't worry, they did their business stuff I guess when they started to establish themselves and become start selling stuff, they eventually they started to structure themselves properly. But the brand itself and even the business, it wasn't there in the beginning. There wasn't even like a thing. Um, Based on what I've read and the videos I've watched, it just that it was a true. It was like a rebel brand. They're rebels. These skateboarders was going around skating with a sticker on it.
Yeah. Vans, Thrasher,
right?
Maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what's happening now? Damon John said that Damon. He spelled his name why I will pronounce it properly. Damon John said.
From Fubu.
Yeah. That there's a chance you're never going to invent or do anything new today.
Yeah.
You might make it more efficient. You might make it, larger, smaller, whatever. It's still the same thing. And that's why it's a lot harder now than it was then. But this is where that's why the business management is important. That's why proper brand processes development is important. Your marketing has to be in point. Your marketing, as I said before, is always in play. You're always marketing. By talking about your company and marketing, you just develop a strategy. That's why there's so many bottled water companies out there. They all just joined in, right? They didn't do it different. They just said, "Hey, I want to be part of this market," and that's all it did.
Yeah, in some sense, viewed through Professor Clay Christensen's et al. Job to be done. There is nothing new under the sun, because by definition, the consumer hires a given product to solve a particular problem, and then your product is just the next iteration or a different branded version of the existing thing. So that the latter is your example with respect to bottled water, where you're not adding anything new. It's just all of your value comes from psychological means. I always call that psychological economic value creation, PEVC. And then again, the contrast is where you do make a substantial incremental improvement with respect to the jobs to be done. So that would be Sarah Blakely with Spanx, where previously consumers had very poor options to solve that particular problem, which I can't remember what her first iteration actually solved. I believe it was wearing some kind of undergarment which makes your butt look big, but also has like the feet cut out, so you can wear it under your pants. And I believe she cut off the feet of pantyhose and used that as a first iteration. So but there was already a need which was addressed. It was just addressed poorly. And so in that sense, like, everything already exists, because if it doesn't exist, if it doesn't exist at all, that means there is no problem, because consumers aren't actually using anything to try and solve it. And then you would have to create a market out of thin air, even though there's no human need there, which is a non-starter.
I think a lot of developments going forward are going to be centered around human needs for sure, because it's really, so years ago there was no sticky notes, there's no peanut butter, so it was easy to invent those things. A lot of them were accidental too.
Sticky notes is a good example by 3M. He wanted to make a very sticky glue, and it didn't work. That's a good example of being flexible.
Exactly. So you move from that into a present day. You're like, well, we have so much stuff. Anything that you want, you can probably find it.
Yes.
Now you're trying to join markets. You're trying to make it easier. You're trying to make it more accessible. You're not really trying to reinvent anything. So human need is going to be a huge focus. I mean, a new color company, I don't see that happening. Unless I'm sure the people making their own cola brands, but making a new cola, I don't consider that innovative. Cola is already there.
I'm actually going to be discussing this in very, very great detail in the upcoming piece on first mover advantage. There's literature on this. There's a piece written by two professors, Suarez and Lanzola. And they have this matrix, the Suarez and Lanzola matrix, where they talk about they put the pace of technological evolution on one axis, say the y-axis, and the pace of the pace of marketing evolution on the x-axis, and then you get four quadrants. So you can have high or low pace of technological evolution and high and low pace of marketing evolution. So then you have, if both are low, you're in an environment which is called calm waters. And in that particular environment, which is like Coca-Cola, the pace of market evolution is quite low. The pace of technological evolution is quite low as well. So in that particular circumstances, being the first to market, first mover, and the stability of the initial dominance position is extremely high. Now contrast that to the situation, the quadrant where both of these components are high. So the pace of technological evolution and the pace of market evolution are both high. Now you're in a domain in a quadrant which is called rough waters, and under those circumstances, the stability of the initial dominance position and the importance of a first mover is extremely low, because you'll be disrupted like that, because you can be disrupted via either technological means or market means. So a lot of these things, which is true for a lot of different questions in entrepreneurial science, depend on the context.
It's really difficult, and I guess to do that, what people used to do years ago, but it's really about differentiation, right? You go into the same market and differentiate yourself. That the innovation, the most innovative thing I've seen in beverage is I think PepsiCo Gatorade released some kind of shot or patch. I don't remember what it is, but that happened because of Mauro Porcini, who started the PepsiCo Design and Innovation Center, if I got the name correctly. So PepsiCo has a design and innovation entity that works on behalf of the company or the brand, and they're really like an internal agency. That's how I describe them. External and internal. They're observing PepsiCo and coming up with solutions, but they work independently regarding these solutions. They've rebranded all the products you probably see coming up from Pepsi was from that that entity, which is they redid Doritos, they redid lots of Frito-Lay. All the Frito-Lay products, I think most of them are rebranded by now. But Gatorade, when they did Gatorade, I was like, wow! I wasn't just Gatorade. They actually did some interesting things. I guess you have to look it up. But it's PepsiCo Design and Innovation. They're our Mauro Porcini. You follow him, you get all the updates. But Gatorade, they made a nice, interesting patch that gives you a shot basically, or something, or monitor something. I wish I remember this stuff. I just consume so much every day with these new ideas, and I love it, but I can't remember them all the time. But it was the most innovative thing I've seen in the beverage space, or from a beverage brand. And I think what PepsiCo did with this, what Mauro did with this innovation, design and innovation entity, is that it's what I always recommend to companies is R&D. That's all it is. You have to have a dedicated team. This is where the technology and marketing, as you're talking about, comes in. You have to have a dedicated team of people who are literally just always exploring things and discovering things that people may have missed in all the things that was already explored. You're paying. That's what I meant by NASA early. NASA is funded to experiment, really. And when they come up with an idea, they test it. PepsiCo has that with this thing, right? And no company other than tech companies possibly have this. A consumer brand doesn't have this. PepsiCo is the first I've heard of that has it. they're reviewing, they're exploring, they're designing, they're presenting. I do not. I also think it had something to do with them. If I remember it correctly, they had stopped using agencies to do work. So that might have been when Maro formed this other company here. I think he left 3M and went to PepsiCo. I don't remember if he formed it as he went or was after, but he was at 3M first, and he went to PepsiCo, and then 2012 PepsiCo Design and Innovation was born.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm looking at. I don't know if anybody's seeing it, but I'm just looking, and I'm like, wow, why didn't anybody think of that before? Just create a place that you can go and explore on behalf of a brand and the company. It's had an R&D department. Consumer brands need that, right? I guess Apple kind of did that. Maybe they've always been doing that experimental stuff. I'm sure Microsoft has their own department, but consumer brands, you don't really see that. And I think it was very interesting. And then just funny you spoke about the technology and the marketing, progress or basis. And I'm like, when I talk about brands, that's where my brain is. It's in this kind of depth, but there's very few people that you can do business with that. You have to speak on another level, or less or more a level field where they've been told about the story. They've been told that this is what you need and this and that. So you're talking business and you're speaking about the generic brand vocabulary, and then you're trying to get this client now. Even semantics and behavioral science and all these things. The big companies are obviously aware of it. They pay lots of money to do this kind of research. And then there's another situation where Dave Trott shared that a snippet from something that he read. I can't remember where it was from, but where they were trying to rebrand different things like airports, and I don't know if you saw that one, and it all led to the cab drivers.
Oh,
Nobody
I
talks
remember.
to the cab driver.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect as well.
Spending $200K on consultants, and then
exactly.
So they keep the museum name the same.
So I'm like, I don't mind you spending that money with a consultancy, but I mean, if you did that, the consultancy did their research and came back with the solution, and it was already there. I'm happy with that. You didn't do it; they deserve the money. But if you had just spoken to people, the consultancy did it for you. That's why you have to pay them. They spoke to the people, right? And it's a convenience. We have time. We're running a government. Who cares? But that's the other side, or that's the negative side of not listening to the right people. Is that I'm not saying a cab driver, why not talk to a cab driver? I'm not saying that the cab driver should get paid for his for that. But it's like, instead of asking the people actually use things, I have the same problem here in Jamaica. Everybody's talking about technology and digital transformation, and one of the biggest things was the new payment system, because honestly, paying stuff here is really hard. I'm just gonna be honest with you. Just the process. I've watched somebody pay at the till, and I couldn't figure out why it took so long. With the card and everything, I'm like, what is happening? So so that's kind of the big talk, is how to do this all differently. But then I'm like, why don't you go down into the town where all the people are? The bank's not gonna let you change the payment system. Forget that. Okay, the bank controls that for now. Let's just leave them with that. Go and look at the problems people are having, and especially with the COVID-19 situation. Go to the congested areas where people are mingling, trying to make a living and trying to go day to day, public transport. Develop solutions for that. Small solutions make a difference, right? And they're really valuable if they solve big problems.
Really good point.
Right. So go there. That's what you need to be focusing on. You're trying to do a new payment system because you want the glory of changing banking. Right? That's how I'm like, no. Focus on the things that people need. And of course, I'm a highly priced consultant, but I work with those kind of clients. I am willing, and I have helped smaller businesses or smaller people with solutions that don't have capital. But I did that because I was being paid lots of money, right?
Yeah.
And then, but you have to, that's the thing, everything, I'm a capitalist. Everything has to be funded. That's how I view the world. Even socialism needs funding. So I don't hate or despise, I don't have a favorite. I like things that work. So I'm a capitalist because everything on this planet needs funding. If we can fund the right things, then you can get the right solutions. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't have funding. They don't have ways of accessing it, or they don't have ways of prototyping to test it and access the funding. These are things that we should be investing in as a country. Here in Jamaica, for example, where we're building more buildings. That's what we're doing. That's the job creation. And I guess because of the economy here and the culture here, we're not a tech-driven country, but we can be. But then it's the same problem in even larger places that can afford it. Is what are you investing money in? But at the same time, to contextualize it into brand and advertising, as we started out, it's what is the brand, what are companies doing, and what are brands communicating that keeps people outside of the fact that the consumer needs something and they're going to pay for it no matter who makes it. What's the relevancy of that regarding the advancement of society and accessibility of products and information? And the answer to that for me, and I think a lot of people agree with me on this, is that that's not the job of advertising. That's not the job of brand. These are just responses to behavior. That's what they are. A brand decides to align itself with the Black Lives Matter movement because consumers care about that. I'm not saying people in the brand or the company don't care about it. I'm just saying it's a logical move. That's how you brand purpose is business purpose. I don't care what anybody else says about the emotional stuff, the stories. The brand purpose is the business purpose. And the business realize that if they don't do certain things to keep consumers engaged with their innovations. But who said it? You can help me with that. They said the business has two functions. Marketing.
Peter Drucker.
Yeah, right. And that's really what it is. If businesses are doing that, consumers will keep buying. The only difference was that the brand design process differentiates the people who do that. One might do it better, and one might do it, a paragraph I shared once is that brand design and development asks delicately complicated questions, but the purpose always remains simple. But the intent is always simple. It doesn't get, it's like, no matter how we describe it, no matter how we talk about it on Twitter and share and back and forth, the business, brand, marketing, they have one primary purpose, right? Business has two, a brand has one. It's representing business. We just do that in different ways. So that's why it's intangible. ISO is actually, I have it actually pretty sure with you. ISO did an article or study on defining the value. That's not the right word. Somebody asked, how do you calculate ROI and brand? And I said, you don't. You calculate ROI and marketing. I also did a study, and I'll send it to you, that about how to calculate or how to define the value of brand, because business people want this. They're not trying to not do brand. They believe in it, but they don't know how to calculate it. Which is when I think I said on the thread with you is that Deming, when he said that not because it's can't be measured doesn't mean it doesn't have any value. Your response was correct as well as that.
Even when it comes
there's something there, to evaluate, but it might not be the typical metric that you're looking for. So I send an article to you from ISO. It was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and even you're bound, even if you do make an attempt to measure it, you're bound to miss things, because a lot of this is non-linear, in the sense that it's very hard to draw a nice, clean curve that shows you the relationship between the inputs and the outputs. You're talking about fame, you're talking about serendipity, which raises head and which increases as fame increases. So there are all these components, and even in the literature, it's recommended to treat brand equity as subjective, because you need it in order to assess marketing performance, because you're going to be looking at external marketing. You're looking at the return on investment with all the activities that you've done related to promoting a product, but you need to adjust it for brand equity, because if you don't do that, then you don't know if you're performing better because your marketing is performing better, or if you're performing better because you're benefiting from past work which you have done on with respect to brand.
Exactly.
So there's definitely a subjective component to it.
I guess what we call impact. No, I wouldn't use impact either. Impact can be measured if you have the right metric. There's advertising, the awareness. There's no industry for brand. That's the problem. There's advertising and marketing, and everything falls underneath that. Brand doesn't have its own industry. Brand is just a process that we use to differentiate the different companies. So it's not tangibly enough to be measured on our standard metrics, but if you find a way to measure awareness, then sure, how many people, how strong is the brand? Oh, 1 million people know it more than 100.
It's a proxy. I think that's a nice way to end the conversation on this point. Dude, I had a blast. Appreciate you having this conversation, sharing your expertise with respect to branding, and lots of interesting stuff here. So thank you again, man. This has been fun. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
Good. All right, we'll continue talking on Twitter. I'll let you know when this goes live.
Oh yeah, I share it everywhere. People watch I'll try to listen to me. So I share.
All right, awesome, man. We'll stay in touch. Take care, buddy.
Yeah, thank you.
Ciao.
Cheers.